Welcome to my next tutorial on anonymous functions, also called Lambda functions. In this tutorial, I will cover what anonymous functions are and why we need them. In Python, a user-defined function begins with def keyword, and it is made up of 4 parts: function name, optional parameter list, body, and optional return or print statements. Whereas anonymous function is just like a regular function, but it is not bound to any name, and it has no return statement, but it still returns a value. An anonymous function consists of lambda keyword followed by an optional comma-separate list of parameter names, a colon, and an arbitrary Python expression that usually uses the input parameters. Note that the expression doesn't have the return keyword in front of it. The lambda keyword has no meaning other than that we are declaring an anonymous function. It is important to mention that you can use an anonymous function anywhere where a regular function is expected. Let's see an example of both anonymous and a user-defined functions. Here I have created a regular function, my function, which takes one argument x and returns its square. Whereas the anonymous function also takes an argument x and returns its square. Note that the Lambda definition doesn't include a return statement, and as I've mentioned before, it always contains an expression which is returned. An anonymous function can be assigned to a variable, and that can be used exactly like standard Python function name. It is important to mention that you don't have to assign an anonymous function to a variable at all. I have done that only for demonstration purposes, to show that you can use an anonymous function anywhere where a regular function is expected. Now the question arises why we need anonymous functions. If you are familiar with built-in functions, filter, map, or reduce, then you know that these built-in functions take a function as argument. Let's see the built-in function filter. The filter function takes a function and an iterable object as arguments, and construct an iterator from those elements of iterable for which the function returns true. Suppose I have a list A of integers from 0 to 10, and I want to create a new list which contains only even numbers. So I can use the filter function to create such list. I have created a function myEvenNumbers which takes an argument x and returns true if the argument is even number. Now I can use myEvenNumbers function in my built-in function filter as first argument and list A as second argument. Because the filter function returns an iterator object, so I have used the built-in function list to convert the iterator object into a list object. In Python 2, I don't have to use the built-in function list in front of my filter function, because in Python 2, filter function returns directly a list object. If you look at the output, you can see that the filter function has returned a list for which my EvenNumbers function evaluates to true. Now if you look at my program, I have no other usage of my EvenNumbers function. In other words, I have created an EvenNumbers function only to pass it as argument in built-in function filter. Actually, it doesn't make any sense to create a function that will only be used once, especially if it's a very simple function. So instead of creating my EvenNumbers function, I can also create an anonymous function inside my filter function, which actually does the same thing, but it makes my code more compact and more readable as shown in this example. So my filter function takes an anonymous function as first argument, call this function on each element of list A, and returns an iterator object that contains only those elements for which the anonymous function has returned true. I hope now you have basic understanding of anonymous functions and why they are useful. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and please subscribe my channel for other tutorials.